So anyone who is planning to start Block 2 counselor program, um, they're supposed to finish AHARA 101. That means, and for now, we're just calling it home study, but I'm available for, um, talking. You can email me, call me, and a lot of assignments, because now the 150 hours plus the 600 hours in Block 2 together, 750 hours, make up the um, Block 2 counselor program. Anyway, I had shared this with you. It is, there might be a few typos. I'm still reviewing it and there'll be concepts that you haven't done before. So I'm just going to go through this a little ebook from top to bottom today. And I'll be asking you if there's anything you haven't understood you want me to go through. So I know we don't need to review micro and macronutrients for Scott. What about Alexis? Are you familiar and happy with especially with micronutrients? Because in Block 2, our focus is on macronutrients and Ayurvedic Ahara. I've just prepared a new module. Can you type in so I know you're listening? Yeah, okay. So you know what we can do is we can set up a separate time in which you and I can just go through all the vitamins, the fats, carbs, and the proteins. We go through from biochemistry perspective, actually, even all the bonds and so on in Block 2. So that we really don't need to cover as much, but the vitamins and the micronutrients and how they're needed, we can. If you're okay with having an extra class with me, we can do that. So let me just go straight to the Agni then. All right. So Kristen had done a lecture with you guys, and she had talked a lot about Agni, and Agni is a very important concept. So you're going to actually get a case study based on Agni, and there's a lot more to do. I've extended your time. You have enough time to finish your case studies. So basically, we know that there's 13 types of Agnis. Do you know any type of Agni that you have studied so far? Can you list any type of Agni? So the Agni that we usually study in Block 1, and we never move beyond that, is called Jathar Agni. Jathar Agni is your digestive fire. It is just one type of Agni. And Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Aham Vaishvanaro Bhutva Praninam Dehamashrita Pranapan Sapayuktaha. So he's saying that I am Vaishvanara, which actually means I'm Jathar Agni, staying in the belly of a person. And this is the Jathar Agni. And when we study the states of these Agnis, these would be, for a kapha person, this would be Manda Agni. Can you read? And this is Tikshna Agni for Pitta, and for Vata person, it's Visham Agni. Welcome, Miriam. I'm going through the Ahara module. Okay. So Jathar Agni is what you usually focus on and what our focus has been in the previous class. And then I think all of you did the Agni assessment form for yourself with Dr. Aparna, right? So let me ask you something. If you have a person who has 5 bowel movements a day and they're soft and his stool is yellow colored and tends to even have a little bit of acidity or acid reflux, produces a lot more HCl and enzymes, what would you call that person's Agni? Mand Agni, Tikshna Agni, or Visham Agni? Manda means slow, Tikshna means sharp, and Vishama means somewhere in the middle, neither, variable. Thank you. That would be Tikshna, right? Let me mix it up a little. If you have a person who has all of these symptoms and is on laxatives, or even is so severely constipated, is on laxatives, likes to drink coffee, and when this person is, and that's why this person is exhibiting symptoms of Tikshna Agni, or maybe it's an after effect of another drug. So it's a temporary situation. But when that person is not on laxatives and not on coffee and not drinking all these acidic foods, then tends to be constipated and hard, dry stool. So the person is exhibiting those symptoms. What would you call this person's Agni? Yes. No, yeah, we have to, it is not what when you ask a person to fill out a form, or when they're telling you what is happening, they're telling the indicators of what's happening right now in their life. So when you question someone and you're trying to find out their Agni, you want to find out, are you taking any laxatives? Sometimes someone's on an antibiotic and it's an after effect. Someone they've just visited Mexico and they had a lot of food. They had Indian food yesterday. So they have diarrhea. Women might exhibit Tikshna Agni when they have their periods because Apana Vayu is very strong, and so certain foods don't. Or they might actually have IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. And sometimes when someone has irritable bowel syndrome, the intestinal linings uh, gets inflamed and it gets disturbed very easily, and they might show a common denominator. It's hard stools or it's Tikshna. Okay. So let me, yeah, so it's not as easy as it sounds because you have to do an Agni assessment for two people. If you've already done for yourself, that's fine. But ideally, I would prefer you get two people and you do an Agni assessment form for them, and it's part of the homework that you will present to us next week. Mandagni, okay, you have a person who has one or sometimes two bowel movements a day, and they have they seem to be very energetic. They seem to be like a pitta person, and they have all the, or they might be a vata person, but they might have um, all the indicators of mandagni, or they might even have indicators, so you can't really figure out what's happening with them. But what we're trying to find out, maybe this person has a thyroid issue, maybe they are on some kind of thyroid medication, which is increasing the agni, which is why their basal metabolic rate is functioning fine and they're having two bowel movements. But what if they were not on it? What were the symptoms? Oh yeah, and everything was too slow. So anybody with um, their thyroid is not producing enough hormones, uh, the thyroid is not functioning properly, would be an indicator of Manda Agni. So for a kapha person like myself, if I don't do anything and I'm a couch potato and I sit all day, I mean, for someone who naturally has a Manda Agni, it'll get more Manda. That's why we have to have more warm foods because we're trying to increase that. So we are not only trying, the indicator of Agni is not just what's coming out of from us as stool or urine, but it's also a basal metabolic rate. So coming back to the Vata person who is having Tikshna symptoms, because maybe this person was on laxatives, you also look at how much energy that person has. The kind of energy a Vata will have, they will, an example of Dr. Aparna, they have a high BMR, but they spend it very quickly. Think of, what is that animal? Is it a cheetah? Or is it a cheetah or a panther? No, it's a cheetah. It can gallop from 1 to 60 seconds very fast, but it can't run too long. It runs out of steam, right? So that would be your vata. Vata can do, very, very fast a few activities, but then they run out of steam. And it's very fast. So you will see those indicators in their activities. For a pitta person to really determine the Tikshna Agni, they burn. I mean, they burn. That is the word. When they sleep at night sometimes and it's warm outside, you will see that their head is sweating. They have sweat on their head. Just sleeping, they're sweating. So they might even exhibit sometimes symptoms of Mandagni or Vishamagni. So when we are doing the Agni test, it is normally when a Kapha person, this is like a very basic thing. Normally a Kapha person will exhibit symptoms of Mandagni, and Pitta person Tikshna Agni, and Vata person Vishamagani, but that is not necessarily true. What kind of medications they're taking? Are they on laxatives? Are they taking stimulants? And people do that all the time. I'm having a chai right now. So this is just one type of Agni. So one is Jatar Agni. Let's look at this assignment and discussion. I know this is going to be hard because this part is home study and we added it like at the last minute. But I'm available to do any phone call with you, or you can email me. And Mariam, I can be okay, study partner if you like. I'm a good study partner. Uh, let's let's talk about Jane Doe. If you remember in your Jane Doe is a 51-year-old woman with menopause, and we said she should not be doing hot yoga, right? Because what happens in hot yoga? Hot yoga usually goes up to 107 degrees, and body temperature can rise up to 103. They, in fact, just did a study. And if your body temperature is rising over 103, that's actually dangerous, especially if it's for an hour, especially for a woman who is perimenopausal, having hot flashes, her hormone level is declining. So now we get more information. She is a Vata Pitta woman. She's currently menopausal. Her Pitta is high. See, her skin is redder and drier. Look at the gunas here. So when we ask you to take a case study, we want you to look at the gunas. Redder, drier, that means she's hotter. And she's hotter. Look at always hot. Lighter. What are the symptoms that you're seeing? Is Vata, Pitta, or Kapha? What is happening here? Just look at the guna. Don't look at anything else. The qualities of Vata, Pitta, or Kapha during perimenopause. Thank you. Yes, the Pitta is, so if a woman is already Pitta and she's perimenopausal, then it's going to be, multiply that by 10 times. Redder, this is the Pitta. Pitta can also dry you. But also she's getting lighter periods. It could be pitta. But you see, this is also vata age. Naturally, the vata is increasing as well. So some women will also experience maybe some tingling, some nerves. I've had actually four women, believe it or not, and late 40s, and they came to me for Ayurvedic massages, and they had been to neurologist or they were planning to go to a neurologist. Oh my God, I get this tingling. What if I have MS? What if something is happening? And I'm like, did you go to your gynecologist, or have you had yourself checked for you might be perimenopausal? But of course, what do I know? I'm just an Ayurvedic practitioner. All four of them, either call me. I mean, this happened in 3 different years, or come later and said you were right. We were just perimenopausal. And of course, they start off with their hormone therapy or whatever they're starting off with, because for some people it is advice. It can be pretty crazy. Now, at this point, what is happening to the Agni? So, and at this time, look at this. She has she's a Vata. Look at what it says. It's a Vata type menopause. And her hot flashes, instead of having being at nighttime, which is normal, are having are happening during Vata times of the day. She has low libido, which is absolutely normal, low prana, low immunity, low tejas, feels dry. And then she goes to her holistic health practitioner who puts her on a hormone balancing diet. So she's not trying to do hormones or uh, the bioidentical hormones that come from a horse, basically. So she's doing yam and okay, let's see. And now she comes to an Ayurvedic practitioner. You have to, if you want to talk about Rasadhatu is the first dhatu to be created. And we can talk about that. So you have to, this is a list of foods suggested for her. Choose and modify her existing plan. So this is your one of a very important case study. You can just share it via Google Docs, or it would be nice if you guys could do it on. You could start a discussion on it, because then everybody can see what everyone else is doing. Is that a good one? And of course, I'm available for a private. So this is one of the things that you're expected to do out of this book. All right. So we talked about. Can you see it, or is it is the font big enough? Okay. So we talked about Jataragni. So Jataragni is, your Vaishvanara. It is in the belly. It is also your basal metabolic rate, but it is really the main Agni. It is so one of the things that we do, and I have Mandagni naturally, is I will say mantras and I'll invoke Krishna. And if I've overeaten or eaten something that you can visualize Agni, a meditation in your belly, and very quickly the food gets digested. And Scott, you should not do that because you're Pitta. So we have discussed Jataragni in previous classes, so we will leave that. And then, how many dhatus are present in the body? How many dhatus? Do you know what dhatus are? Now this gets a little tricky. There are 7 dhatus. So when we eat, the food gets all, it first gets mixed with the mucosa, then hydrochloric acid is produced, all these enzymes are produced, the food is getting churned and mixed and created into this thing called chyme or chyle. And this is carried by Vyanavayu, and the first thing to be produced is rasa, which is both your plasma, in Ayurveda, both the plasma portion of your body as well as the lymphatic fluid. And if a woman is nursing, then this rasa, the secondary rasa to be produced is the milk. So whatever you're eating is getting converted into the child, and yeah. No, it is beyond the stage of digestion. So the stage of digestion is the first stage is kapha stage of digestion, right? It gets mixed in, churned in. The second is pitta when all the enzymatic activity, the bhutagnis are acting on it. The second is pitta type, and then the food is now taken so that it can get converted and it can nourish the dhatus. The first dhatu to be created or nourished would be rasa, which includes both the lymph fluid. What is the color of the fluid lymph? Do you know what is lymphatic fluid? What is its color? What does it do? Yeah, it is a clearish, little whitish, yes, clear white. And what does it do? What about plasma? What is the color of the plasma? And what does the lymph fluid do? And well, it is protection. So the first dhatu in Ayurveda, they are not separate systems. Yes, it's filled with when we have any kind of trauma, um, whether it's internal or external. So the immune cells are produced the the rasa dhatu, and also the plasma portion of the blood. So if you take the blood in a centrifuge, and the portion of the blood that is yellow, it separates. That is the rasa. Dr. Aparna does a very beautiful, in block 2 we discuss rasa dhatu, even because lymphatic system and the plasma is not, it's kind of homologous to rasa. They're both rasa dhatu. And rasa dhatu is the first dhatu that is created. So it's not two separate systems. So if you start studying anatomy in United States, they always start with, for some reason, I don't know why, with muscles, which is kind of easy, I guess. And then they move on to basically musculoskeletal system, and then do nervous system and cardiovascular. In Ayurveda, we do not start like that. First, we study the Agnis. That's what we're doing right now. And then we study first we study the doshas, the agnis, then we study rasa dhatu, which includes both the lymphatic system and the plasma portion of the blood. And then we study the rakta, which is basically red blood cells. And what about the white blood cells? That would be the Rasadhatu. Rasadhatu is the protector. Rasadhatu is the first dhatu to be created. So all this, the food that we have eaten that got converted into chyle is carried by Vyana, and the rasa creates whatever is left over of rasa creates rakta, leftover creates mamsal. So it kind of um, think of it as a path that the food takes. So a path is taken, the food, the converted food is the child, which we call ahara rasa, travels through rasadhatu, nourishing rasadhatu, then through rakta, mamsha, meda, ashti, majja, shukra, right? I do not really like to use the English names because, for example, majja dhatu is both the nervous system as well as the bone marrow. So if you say majja dhatu is just the nervous system, that's not true, because and then it has a deep relation with rakta dhatu because your the red blood cells are being produced in there. So there's so much connection, but in Ayurveda we always say vata dosha first, pitta second, kapha third. We always do Jataragni first, and this is the order that is followed, so you'll have to memorize it. So for each of this dhatu to be, um, rasa being both the lymphatic fluid as well as the plasma, rakta being your red blood cells mostly, your blood, mamsa being your muscle, meda being your fat, asti being your skeleton system, majja being your bone marrow as well as nervous system, and finally shukra dhatu being your reproductive fluids. And the leftover, what is left over after that becomes ojas, right? And how is this transformation of food that we ate? It's getting transformed into ahar rasa or chayal, and then it's traveling and getting transported, and then it's getting converted and nourishing. How is this conversion happening? By dhatu agnis. So 7 dhatus, each dhatu has its dhatu agni. Rasa dhatu agni, rakta dhatu agni, mamsa dhatu agni, meda dhatu agni, asti dhatu agni, majja dhatu agni, shukra dhatu agni. And this is kind of important. When dhatu agni is weak, for example, if someone has, if somebody's rasa dhatu agni is weak, then they might become anemic because the quality of the dhatu will decrease and not enough blood in the body. When dhatu agni is strong, too strong, it is also decreased as well. This is something we discuss in block 2. As long as you know the 7 dhatus and you know this is part of the second stage of food digestion. Now we're talking a little, is it too much? And I think this is something that already Kristen did cover this. Panchamahabhutas, you have, so in when you study biochemistry in the West, you study you study about how the liver is breaking down, how enzymes are produced to break down proteins, and then carbohydrates are getting broken down into glucose, and there's the glycogen cells and whatnot. And you're studying how fatty acids are getting broken down, depending on what kind of fatty acids they are. And mostly it's all related with the liver. So what we call it in Ayurveda is when we say that carbohydrates are getting broken down, we are saying that earth element is getting broken down. When we say proteins are getting broken down in the body, we are saying earth element. When we say fats are getting broken down, we are saying water element. And this agni that works on breaking down things is called bhut agni. So carbs and proteins would be earth element, and fats would be water element, and spices and beans would be air and space element. It's kind of hard to reconcile. So when a person is trying to lose weight in Ayurveda, we want them to sweat a lot because the fats are water element. They are not earth element. We want them to reduce their carbs and mostly proteins because that is what's making the weight, right? And if you're trying to gain weight, then you increase the carb and protein. It's a different idea. So a person who's kapha already needs to take fewer or lesser carbohydrates and proteins. When I say carbohydrates, I mean more, of course, low glycemic index, whole foods, and whatnot, compared to fats. So all this conversion is done by Bhutagni. Does it make sense? You should go through this chapter. All right. Oops. Can you see this? So, I really don't want to start off by, I really wasn't sure. I mean, we had a talk with Dr. Kirti whether we should be introducing this in block 1 or not. But, the kind of assignments that you have been doing, they're so awesome. He said, okay, let's just do it. You're not going to confuse them. All right. So what is ama? We eat our food, and some portions of food gets metabolized, and others, it's just there. It hasn't, it's still in the body. It decomposes. So undigested, unmetabolized food molecules that have not been broken down, or we've been talking, Scott and I, we were talking about, didn't I do this? We talked about the lipophilic. So ama is literally, yes. So that's all ama. So when you ate something, and it doesn't matter whether it was organic or not, it did not, because your agni was not strong, ama was produced. Now let's talk about, there's 3 types of ama. Normally ama always has the qualities of kapha. It is the kapha type. Then that's kind of standard. And when this ama, which has the same qualities of kapha, it has not been transformed. For example, it could have been, I don't know, it could have been a piece of rice in butter or something, and it did not get converted, metabolized. It became ama, right? Because the agni wasn't strong. And then it stayed there, and the person's vata went high, right? And slowly a person is feeling dryness. And what happens if you throw food outside? Have you ever seen the first thing that happens to food if you throw it out in the sun and dryness? It gets dry and cakey and brown, right? That's called samavata. It's the same ama. We call it the ama is not only the quality of ama has been affected by, because how can you see vata? Vata is vayu, it's air, right? Isn't making sense? Ama is that unmetabolized, uncooked, undigested food molecule, which could be water soluble or it could be fat soluble. And now nothing happens. A person's vayu is increased. It became dried and cakey, and it's you can't even get it out of your system just with water, and then a person's tongue will be brown, and it'll be like, have you seen mud when it gets really dried? It has these cracks in it. So that's what we call samavata. Sam simply with same, with, sa is with ama. Vata and a person has ama. Pitta and a person has ama. Kapha and a person has ama. That's all it is. Samapitta happens when person has such a high agni. Literally their basal metabolic rate is so high, and they're burning at such a high rate that what happens, the food doesn't have time to get digested properly. Have you ever burnt anything on the stove? I've done that so many times. You put something and the heat was so high that it got burned and it became charred. So think, when food becomes charred, it did not even have a time to get, because the body's pitta is so high. That is samapitta. It's yellow in color. Let's put it this way: a person ate something, or a person's been eating something, and maybe a person has been eating something which increases pitta, and the person's pitta is already high, and all the pitta enzymes are acting on it, and the person is getting acid reflux. The kind of ama that is produced with the action of pitta is very yellow in color. Can you hear me? Okay. Can you hear me better? Should I repeat this? Should I repeat it? I heard that my audio was coming in and out. All right, let's start again. Ama is what? How is ama produced? Agni is either low, Agni is either high, Agni is either variable. Food that we ate did not get digested, unmetabolized. We were, someone took an antibiotic or somebody took some kind of prescription drugs. That can also lead to creation of ama. Maybe you ate when there was, you had a you ate before you were supposed to eat. It could be, many number of causative factors. And yes, you started off with ama. So usually all ama is kapha ama because it's food that did not get digested, right? But if there are conditions of dryness, this ama, which we called kapha, can become samavata because it can become dry and all the gunas and qualities of vayu can be in it. That's all we need to know. And samapitta is produced, so samakapha will be produced when usually a person has mandagni. And this is vishamagni. And samapitta will be a person has too much pitta in their body, too much acid, too much bile, too many, it's going crazy, too many enzymes. So they have to be on a pitta pacifying diet here. And from this starts disease. Okay? So this is something, you have to read it and you have to start discussion on it. So it gives you why this ama is happening, what are the indicators of ama, lack of appetite, lack of heaviness, lethargy, gas, constipation, oily bowel movement, white coated tongue, whitish mucus, sticky bad breath, and signs of malabsorption, excessive saliva. So it's giving you everything which has both mand agni and samakapha. And why am I telling you this? Because you're supposed to present 2 agni assessment forms next week. I will not be talking, you will. And you will be one for yourself and one for another person, or you can have both other persons. And you will be talking about, if that person had mandagni or samakapha. And if they had no ama, then you say no ama was indicated. But don't go around looking for ama. A person will feel fatigued even after 8 hours sleep. That's a very classic indicator. Whether they're starving themselves or they're eating, they just feel very dull. Because ama has usually all the indicators of a kapha. And then samapitta. Pitta influences the digestion. And of course, this is Tikshna Agni. And sometimes they have, of course, acid reflux acidity, but their tongue will be yellow. Okay? Vishamagni we already know. And what will the signs of vata would be? They might get chronic constipation, bloating, gas, pain in the lower abdomen, prickling, tingling, and brown colored tongue, and cracks on the tongue. Okay, let me write that down. So you do look at the tongue when you're checking the Agni. So what is Agni assessment? It's the most important assessment that you will do. I would say even more than the Prakriti Vikriti. I would give it 60% and I would give you a Prakriti test 40% weightage. It's because this is where you as an Ayurvedic practitioner will make a plan for them. Your entire protocol that you create would be balance the Agni, get rid of the Ama. So it's even more important than fighting the Prakriti and Vikriti. So 2 next week. So for Pitta, yellow, everything is, a person has red and yellow eyes, and this Klira is not clear. And then there's some protocols on how to detoxify this Ama, which we are not really concerned with because the detox program is given here. If person has Ama and is also Kapha, then for Pitta, Vata, some protocols are given here, right? So you all received the form, right? Let me just upload it once more. All right, I'm back. All right. Sorry, Scott, I hadn't started yet. I was just looking at it. All right, this is the Agni assessment form. Can everyone hear me? Yeah, okay. So I think Dr. Aparna did this Agni assessment form with all of you. So you have to present this Agni assessment for yourself or for someone else, ideally two people next week, along with protocols. So you have to check for AMA. In Mala, even though the form doesn't really talk about urine and sweat, it would be a good idea to even ask question about, urine and sweat, because if a person sweats a lot and urinates a lot, um, especially in what is the color of what time, if the urine burns and everything. I will write about that in the forum so you have more questions. So I can actually add these questions right here. So if you don't have, if you do have someone to do this form for, that's great. If not, find someone, maybe do it for yourself and, somebody in your neighborhood, friend, relative. And remember, you will give them a lot of free advice. So you will find out all the three malas. So this is such a loaded question, honestly. I don't know what I was thinking. Good, fair, poor. No, this was made by one of our teachers. Really, nobody answers that correctly. So please give your own, when you're asking these questions, find out the causative factors. Why is the person a kapha person and they're having acidity? Do they drink a lot of coffee? Do they, what are they eating? So you'll have to know what they're eating. So you have to present this for yourself, or because it's only 1 week, let's have you just present one, okay, for next week. So this is kind of very, very, very important presentation. You have to find out the bowel movements. And please ask, are you on laxatives? Are you taking any herb teas? Like I had one person who came, she had classic Vishamagani, but she said she had 3 bowel movements. And then she said she had not revealed that she takes the smooth move tea, which has senna. Senna is not just a laxative, it's a purgative. It is such a hard laxative that we use it purges your body, and without it, she was severely constipated. Nothing worked. So anyway, we want to ask if they're on any stimulants. We want to ask if there's, please do this for someone, and along with what protocols. And as far as the protocols are concerned, it doesn't have to be 5 pages. A list is fine. Whatever the causative factors that are causing the Agni, maybe it's the food that they're eating, maybe people don't know that there's a correlation if you have Hashimoto's or thyroid issues with gluten, and is there anything that is, is there any inflammation? Try and eliminate some foods and see what happens. Even in 1 or 2 days, there's, you will see that it's good. So the same person you're doing the Agni for is the same person you will present their case study the week after. So next week you're presenting the Agni, and the week after you will be presenting the case study. And how the case studies get done, I will present next week, otherwise you'll get confused. I just want you to focus on doing the Agni. Okay? And on the forum, of course, we'll be talking about all kind of Agni issues, from celiac disease to, and that would be, the homework for this week. So for those of us who joined later, I had shared, not everybody has been going on the Ahara before. I'm so sorry to be repetitive for those of you who already heard me. NAMA requires us to have Ayurveda counselor program 750 hours, which is why now 150 hours for block 1 are separate and 600 hours are separate. So we have added material to both block 1 and block 2 so that we can cover the number of hours. So I send you all of this on the forum. I attached it, and it's Ahara 101, it's home study. This actually used to be a part of the block 2 book, but now it's your book. feel free to email me, call me, schedule an appointment with me, take an extra class. I'm available during evenings, and I'm also available, no, evening only on Monday and Wednesday. I'm not available, but I'm available definitely every morning and also on weekends. So ask me what you want me to do. Just go through this book, what you don't understand, you know, let me know. Okay? All right.
It's been a little bit of a hair-raising experience, but you get to learn a lot of starting a practice. Thank you. You know, you always question whether you know enough or not, and it's always, you realize with Ayurveda, it's a never-ending study, so it requires a certain sense of personal commitment. So I hope this can inspire all of you as well through the study of Ayurveda. Anyway, I wanted to wish everyone a good morning, namaste, and thank you for being here. I'm a little bit unprepared, maybe not as prepared as I'd like to be. The perfectionistic side of me wants to be extremely prepared and know everything in and out. So this will be a little bit of an extemporaneous presentation, perhaps. So thank you. So today we're going to talk about kapha and its subtypes. But before we kind of start to talk about kapha specifically, as Monica G touched on in their earlier presentation about, you know, the dhatus and the malas, right? In Ayurveda, the study of dosha, dhatu, and mala are really the most important components that we have to understand in order to understand the body. And when you start to compare it to medical knowledge, you know, some of it may seem very subtle and esoteric, things that you cannot really tangibly study, right? And so the strength of the Ayurvedic system is really the fact that you're not only understanding at a very root level, at a very fundamental level, the fundamental physical substances that compose the body, but also the functional intelligence or the organizing intelligence that creates and governs its function, right? And so Ayurveda kind of explains the body's composition in terms of the three basic systems of the dosha, the dhatu, and the mala. And just as Monica G just touched on, the concept of the dhatu or the tissue system really covers the function, structure, and substance. And then the waste, the malas, are also defined primarily as a substance. But when you start to get into doshas, it's not so easily objectifiable. It's not like you can touch on it and go, okay, this is kapha, right? It can be really understood in terms of its material substance, but rather, well, we have to understand doshas through its operational dynamics, right? So when you look at a person's dosha, through the Ayurvedic lens, you're really deriving the existence of the dosha through darshana, through the extensive observation. We're always comparing what is happening in nature and how is it manifesting in the body, right? So for today, we're going to touch on how the elements of nature kind of manifest in the human body as kapha, basically. Now, as I said before, doshas really refer to the functional intelligence of the body. And so as a physician or as a practitioner, you know, it's through looking at the doshas that one can look at the clinical symptoms and the cause of disease and so on, right? So in order to understand the doshas better, before I get into the actual kapha dosha, you really have to, as Ayurvedic students, we really have to understand very profoundly the nature of the pancha mahabhutas, or the five elements, and how their organizing principles really allow us to look at the doshas and look at it gives you an insight into the dynamics that provide all the bodily processes, right? So how the elements manifest within the body is what gives rise to doshas, right? So then we can start to look at to see, well, how do the five elements become the three doshas, right? And, you know, hopefully you all know the five elements. So we know akash or space is the first element to manifest, and prithvi or earth, is the last element to manifest. And they're pretty static and unchanging in their nature, right? So we know akash, or space, is a holding container of the emptiness of space that holds everything else. Whereas the quality of earth, or prithvi, is the solid nature of earth, the structure, the mass, right? That kind of creates form, if you will. So you can see the progression of the five elements from Akash to Prithvi, all the way from the subtle, the thing that you cannot touch, to the thing that you can touch, so to speak. And so if you start to look at the earth element, when you look at its mass and its solidity, we can see it really doesn't change. It's pretty solid, right? And the only time it ever changes really is when the three remaining active elements of Vayu and Agni and Jala, Jala meaning water, comes about. And it's the dynamic nature of the other three elements, Vayu meaning air, Agni meaning fire, and Jala meaning water. It's because of the dynamic nature of these three elements that the capacity to change and process, the constant dynamics of change in nature, comes about. So I hope you kind of get that sort of understanding. And the water element and I'm leading up to what forms the kapha dosha, the water element, or Jala, has a characteristic of fluidity, right? We know that water flows, but it also has a cohesive principle, right? It is associated with the moon. We see it manifested, how it influences the ocean tides and the flow of fluids in the body, our lymphatic system, etc. And if you look at the quality of water, the Jala element, you can see how it manifested rain. So, when rain comes and it kind of mixes with the earth, rain has the ability to add to an element, right? And so when it mixes with the earth, you get a little bit of this sort of liquefied, but sort of massy, solidy kind of substance, right? So I hope you start to see the progression of how the elements manifest. But at the same time, it would be completely incorrect to think of doshas as, kind of being a manifesting of the three dynamic elements. So we can't just say vata dosha is just akash, or, because it's actually vata dosha is akash plus vayu, right, the space and air element. And subsequently, pitta dosha is agni and water, right? And similarly, kapha dosha is Jala and Prithvi, okay? So as Jala becomes supported by Prithvi, as water becomes supported by earth, it becomes kapha dosha, and it controls liquefaction, cohesion, lubrication, and it's also at the same time responsible for giving solidity and structure to the body. So I always think of sort of the metaphor when we see children on the beach, and they're making little mud castles out of the sand and the water, right? Well, water by itself is just flowing in the ocean, and the sand on the earth is sort of loose. It doesn't hold together. There is no cohesive principle. But when it comes together, that cohesiveness comes about. And so similarly, kapha dosha sort of reflects the qualities of water along with the traits of the earth element. So now when you start to look at these two elements, you can start to see the qualities of kapha, right? So kapha is heavy, slow, cold, solid, steady, and it can also be oily, right? Because we know that water has that flowy tendency, and then when it's mixed with earth, it can become oily. And so it's really important to understand how the bhutas, the elements, kind of manifest or expresses itself as a dosha. So I hope that understanding is clear. Then the next thing we will also look at is how each dosha exerts a dominant influence in a particular zone or geographical location in the body, right? So, and many of you, I think in my last lecture of the pitta dosha, we kind of covered, how pitta affects, through the GI tract and things like that. Do you have any questions so far? Okay, so then moving on, the other thing I wanted to touch on is how do we look at kapha in the stages of life, right? So if you think about it, when a human being is born, for example, right, at the initial stages of human development, from birth onto puberty, babies are born with a kind of a layer of coated fat, right? And so that phase of life that characterizes the very rapid expansion of the human body from that little infant that is sort of anywhere from, 4 to 8 pounds, or how much ever babies weigh at different to different parts of the world. There's a very fast and accelerated growth that happens from birth to puberty. And so that phase is also characterized by a lot of nourishment and growth in the body substance and size. So therefore, this phase of life, or this stage of development, is also referred to as a kapha stage of life, because if you think about it, the main quality of the dosha is being added to, right, unit by unit. It's like accumulating body mass regardless of what they eat. So children could be malnourished, and yes, you can still see that they might have a smaller form, but they're still growing, right? They have children naturally have a greater amount of fatty tissue, and that's a big characteristic of kapha. So that's why you can also see children in infants, anywhere between 0 to 13, as Monica G has indicated. That's also the time when you start to see kapha-related disorders, right? So you have the colds, the ear infections, the sinus infections, the allergies, the respiratory infections, right? So these are all the common ailments. If you start to think about, well, what are all the common ailments that hit children, right? This is what you hear, right? Cold and all that sort of kapha aggravating sort of infection. So, and then you start to notice, well, where do all these illnesses start to occur? And they all start to occur in what we call the kapha zone of the body, which is sort of the respiratory system, and also in the head, so to speak, right? So we'll get into this in a little bit more detail here. So hopefully at the end of this lecture, you will have understood what kapha is. And notice I'm not saying kapha, it's actually kapha. And the word kapha actually comes from two words, ka meaning water and pa meaning flourishing, right? And so that which is flourished by water is kapha, basically. And so another term for kapha is also sleshma. Sleshma meaning unctuous or to hug is really what it means. And so basically it is how water hugs earth to form these molecules of kapha to create this compact mass, right? So hopefully you start to get into sort of the definition and understanding of what kapha really means. Now, as we get into all these things of kapha, please ask questions if something is not clear in the chat box, and Monica G or I will try to answer the question. So the definition of kapha in the text of Ayurveda, kena jalena phalati iti kapha. So the one that is formed by the predominance of jala, water mahabhuta, is called kapha, as I just indicated. And also the synonym for kapha is also sleshma. Shlish alingane iti sleshma. So the root word for sleshma is really shlish, which is to hug or to embrace, to have that binding property. So again, that cohesive property of kapha is what defines kapha. So we can think of kapha as the cohesiveness intelligence, or the binding intelligence of the body. And you can see how when this cohesiveness or binding comes about, that's what helps us maintain the structural integrity of the body as well as the functional integrity of the body. And as I mentioned earlier, it is the predominance of the jala and the prithvi elements. And I'd like for you to start thinking about the Sanskrit terminologies for the 5 elements, as well as the terminologies we discuss in Ayurveda. I know it's challenging in the beginning But this is the time when you can take individual words, break it down, and understand sort of the Sanskrit etymology that gives you a much deeper understanding, because sometimes English can be a little bit limiting. When I just say water and earth, it doesn't really convey the essence of what's happening with the meaning of what water means, or with the meaning of what earth means when I say Jala and Prithvi. So I encourage you to sort of, dive deep into what the words mean in Sanskrit, right? All right. So then what I'd like to get into is how kapha sort of manifests in the body, right? So as I said, the molecules of kapha are basically derived from water and earth. The qualities of kapha are heavy, slow, dull, cold, oily, liquid, slimy, smooth, dense. It's also soft and it's static, right? If you think about the earth quality, it is static, it is sticky, it is cloudy, it is hard, and it is gross. And then the taste associated with kapha is sweet, right? The other thing I wanted to touch on is the force of kapha, right? So kapha's force tends to be moving inward into the body, or centripetal forces are what govern kapha, because that's the binding nature that gives you the structure of kapha. And so similarly, it also has an anabolic quality, right? So it actually creates the structure of the body. Now, if you think of kapha in the body, if you think of our body, we're sort of, almost 70 to 80% water, right? And so kapha is predominantly present in the lymph, in the liquid portion that governs the body. And so similarly, we can also say that kapha rules the plasma portion of the blood. Now, we can't really say that rakta, or blood, is kapha, because rakta also has the fire element in it, right? And so the plasma portion, which is a fluid portion of blood, is also ruled by kapha. And as I mentioned earlier, when you start to look at the energetic zone, or the geographical zone of the body that is governed by kapha, the primary site of kapha is the lungs and the respiratory tract, okay? And it's also present in other parts of the body. So, for example, kapha, as Monica G mentioned, ama has a quality of kapha. Why? Because it's sticky, it's cloudy, right? It has kind of that earthy, fluidish, sticky, oily nature to ama. But it's also present in semen, in muscles, in fat, in connective tissue, and also in the brain, right? So if we look at the importance of kapha, and on this slide, there's a sutra here, and I'm very horrible with my pronunciation, so my apologies. Prakrutastu balam shleshma vikruto mala uchyate, which means that when kapha is in normal state, in the prakriti state, it is considered as bala, or strength of a person, okay? So sometimes, as a result, because again, kapha refers to solidity, the stability of a person. So because of this, the word bala, which really means strength, not bala. Bala means completely something different. A young person, or a youth, or a young man is what the word bala means. So bala means strength. And so that's another synonym for kapha. And from a functional perspective, we can also refer to this strength as the ability to do work, the capacity to do work, the strength to do work, but also the capacity to resist disease and decay, right? And so at the very essence of kapha, we can say that ojas, which is sort of at the root core of kapha, it is also the sustaining and protecting factor of the body. I hope you're beginning to see that. And as I said, here's the Charaka Samhita, the sutra from Charaka Samhita. Guru Shita Mridu Snigdha Madhura Sthira Pichilaha. So these are the qualities. And again, it's very important for you to sort of at least memorize when you get into each of the doshas. At a very fundamental level in Ayurveda, it is extremely important to memorize the attributes or the qualities of each dosha, right? And as I said before, qualities of kapha are heavy, cold, smooth, oily, stable, slippery, and sweet in taste. So as I said before, the main site of kapha is in the respiratory tract and in the lungs. However, kapha is present in other areas. It's present in the thoracic region, or urus, the head, shirus, the neck, kanta, joints, sandhi, the upper part of the stomach, the upper fundus, right? And this is really important to understand because different parts of the stomach have different functions of doshas as well. The adipose tissue, the meda dhatu that we touched on earlier, the tongue, which is jihva, and the nose, grana. So you can start to see when you look at the general sites of kapha, how the quality of earth and water can start to express itself in its function or in the functional intelligence of these geographical sites within the body, right? Okay. So among all of these sites, the urus or the chest region is considered as the main seat of kapha, again, the respiratory area, okay? And so the general functions of kapha, as you can see, it provides the oiliness, the lubrication to the body structures, and we'll get into this in a little bit of detail. It acts as the binding agent. It helps maintain the structural integrity of the body. And again, through the quality of solidity and stability, you can see how it promotes the bulk and the structure and the steadiness of the body, right? But at the same time, it also maintains the sexual potency, the reproductive capacity. So remember, it is the quality of semen, right? And in order to reproduce as human beings, we need the ova and the semen coming together. And it's because of the nourishing capacity of kapha that we can have that potency that brings about human life. At the same time, it also provides the strength, right? The ability to kind of survive, the ability to self-nourish. So even, I don't know if you guys have seen this study, but if a human being can literally go for about 3 weeks without food, and it's because the ability of the tissues to nourish itself exists even when you don't get food. I'm not recommending that you fast for 3 weeks. I'm saying if you're ever put into that situation, the body finds a way to nourish itself from its deepest tissue layers to continue providing this nourishment and the capacity to survive, right? And so this is the quality of kapha that gives you that forbearance, right? The ability to withstand crisis, the ability to withstand trauma. The solidity of the body is what allows us to do that. All right. So before I get into the subtypes of kapha, I also wanted to touch on how kapha manifests in nature, right? So we know, if you look at the qualities of kapha, the jala and the prithvi qualities, right? We know that kapha expresses in nature in the form of rain or snow, right? And so most people, if you look at seasons, for example, you will start to get watery secretions in the body during the colder and cooler times of year. So it's during these seasons, too much of the watery influence can also cause the kapha dosha to become excessive or imbalanced. So when coldness or wetness and heaviness gets too strong, so strong that it overwhelms the pitta's qualities of heat, that's when we start to develop colds and head and chest congestions or sinusitis or watery eyes, etc. So really, what common sense should tell us is, remember I told you a physician or an Ayurvedic practitioner really starts to observe nature and observes how it's counterbalanced in the body or how it's overwhelming the body and how the nature expresses itself in the body. So during these seasons when the water element or the earth element is overwhelming all the other qualities in the body, that's when you start to see, well, how is kapha dosha overwhelming this person? And so one of the keys to maintaining good health in cold conditions is you would want to counterbalance it with dressing warmly, for example, or taking warm food or doing warm beverages. So it is counterintuitive to drink an ice-cold drink in the middle of winter, for example, whereas you would want to lean towards the hot teas and the warm drinks, etc. So I hope you're starting to see that as well. And then also, because of the nature of kapha, because it is slower in metabolism, you can start to see how it expresses itself in a kapha-dominant prakriti, for example. So if you look around your family members or your neighbors or your coworkers, you can start to see, well, how does nature express as kapha in this person? Now remember, we all have all three doshas. What I mean is, who is kapha dominant, right? So people with kaphic constitutions can have a very relatively slow metabolism. They take a longer time to digest their food, and they can easily miss a meal, by the way, without discomfort. And they tend to perform activity in a very methodical and a slow fashion. And they have plenty of strength and stamina, and they can continue sustaining an effort without getting easily exhausted like a pitta person or a vata person might, because they're reacting slower, they're thinking slower, right? And so this steadiness, this slowness, and this stability prevents them from getting easily stressed. And so all of these movements actually lends itself for a kapha person to become naturally resistant to disease, whereas a pitta person or a vata person tends to get easily prone to disease, right? Kapha people may need a little bit longer to understand something, but once they understand it, it is stuck. They will never forget, right? They have great comprehension and they have great memory, and they're very even-tempered. Unlike a pitta person who explodes, or a vata person who's very erratic, a kapha person is very even-tempered in their content, and so they tend to be more emotionally stable, and they're usually satisfied with whatever comes to them. So these are the kind of people you want to have as friends, because they're the ones who are loyal to you at all times, regardless of how erratic or variable you are, right? So you can start to see how the mental expression of kapha comes about as well. The other, when going pathological with the emotional side, you can see the same qualities of that holding on to things and that stability and steadiness can also go in the extreme way. So, whether they want to love or hate or do whatever, kapha people tend to hold on to feelings for a long time, right? They don't let go very easily. So the kapha property of accumulation and holding on are the people that also become hoarders, right? These are also people that can get jealous or sort of kind of, once they're loyal to you, but boy, if they ever flip over, then it's a done deal, So subsequently, when the kapha nature starts to go pathological, if you will, when it starts to get overwhelmed and then the other doshas go out of balance, the individual, you can see where these favorable qualities of kapha can then start to become distorted, right? So subsequently, a kapha dominant or over pathological individual can also become very dull, very lethargic, complacent. They become apathetic. They don't want to move. They just want to sleep all the time. So you can see how the qualities of this can develop into depression, right? They might just sleep for many long hours, and then their digestion becomes sluggish, and then they become overweight, and that tendency to accumulate turns into possessiveness and greed, wanting to hang on to material things. And so these are also the people then that are easily prone to sinus and respiratory disease and allergies and sugar intolerances and indigestion and edema and morbid obesity, right? These are people that quickly can become obese because it takes them a very long time to lose weight. So hopefully you're starting to see how this comes about. So we'll get into the subtypes of kapha, and there are 5 subtypes of kapha, and based on how they manifest and express in the different areas of the body is how we classify kapha in all these different ways, right? So in the previous slide, you can see how the subtypes of kapha manifest, and we'll get into a little bit more detail here Again, I haven't had a chance to look at this particular slide presentation in greater detail, so forgive my seeming unpreparedness, but I'll get into each of these of kapha types. So starting with the first one, the tarpaka kapha, is really the kapha quality that is responsible for the moisture in the nose, mouth, area, and eyes, and the brain, okay? So let me just kind of get to that. So tarpaka is also that governs the myelin sheath, for example, right? So the word tarpaka comes from the Sanskrit word tarpana, which means to nourish or retain. And we also use the word tarpana to offer, to make offerings of food. So in rituals, in Vedic rituals, when we offer to our ancestors, we always offer food and other food-like substances, or when we do pujas. So that is also, and we offer water as an offering, and that's considered tarpana, okay? The word tarpana also means contentment. And so when you look at tarpaka kapha, where it is predominant is in the white matter of the brain, right? So if you look at the brain, it's very thick, you know, it can be that quality, that sticky matter, the white matter of the brain has that sticky, slimy, soft quality. And this is also what nourishes the brain cells. It is also what is present in the cerebrospinal fluid, the CSF, and in the meninges. And this is what surrounds our soft brain tissue and the spinal cord, right? So if you start to think about it, how does tarpaka kapha start to nourish the brain? It is really through the cerebrospinal fluid. As a matter of fact, I've read some amazing studies. So science is actually catching up to what Ayurveda has known for centuries in all the amazing functions of cerebrospinal fluid that was never known before, right? And so the quality of the cerebrospinal fluid, because its primary content is really glucose and other minerals that sort of nourish the brain and the nervous system, it is also sweet in nature, right? And you can also see from what Monica G had lectured before when she touched on the rasa dhatu of the plasma, the plasma of the body. The quality of the plasma of the body is also added to by the tarpaka kapha, okay? And then another site of tarpaka kapha that's really important is the myelin sheath of the body. Now, the myelin sheath is sort of that protective sheath that covers all of our nerve cells. And this is a really important component in the firing of synapses, or the transmission of, neurotransmitter messages, the chemicals that are transmitted from one end of the nerve to the other, right? And if this starts to wear down, that protective layer that is rendered to the myelin sheath by the tarpaka kapha starts to wear down. And so you can see people with multiple sclerosis or, demyelinated sheath syndromes in physical bodies that start to have nervous system disorders, right? So tarpaka kapha is extremely, extremely important. It lubricates the sinuses and the nasal cavities. It's also present in the substance of the spinal cord, where it actually governs our reflexes, basically, right? And so that substance is also what's important to actually complete the neural feedback circuit. So when we make our motor movements in the body, the brain is sending these signals that completes that neural circuit. So without tarpaka kapha, you can see people with Alzheimer's starting to develop dementia, for example, or people with Parkinson's disease that starts to have the tremors in their body because they're no longer able to complete that circuit of motor movement in a controlled way. So you can start to see how important tarpaka kapha is in the body, right? Now, from an intelligence perspective, we have to think about tarpaka kapha as being responsible for the sense of perception and awareness in the body as well, right? It is through tarpaka kapha that prana has to carry its function of perception and awareness. So this is really important to understand as well, okay? Because of the sense of perception, we also have a sense of time in the way of stimulus and response, right? So while we think of time in the way of thought, like in linear time, right, we can't really have space without time. So when we think of sarpaka kapha, from the time we touch a fire to the time we pull back our finger, that's a neurological time response from a stimulus to a response. So I hope that makes sense. And sarpaka kapha is very important in that function as well. And so you can see for people with dementia, the sarpaka kapha can actually start to become very rigid and crystallized, and that sort of starts to create confusion of perception and awareness in the brain, right? So hope you're starting to connect the dots here. What else do I want to start about sarpaka? I think that's enough for now. So then the next thing that we will get into is bodhaka kapha, and I want to make sure that these slides aren't getting into all the other details. Okay, so Monica G, we're good on time, I hope. I know I'm kind of getting into a lot of detail here. Okay, so then touching on bodhaka kapha. So then this is sort of the next most important type of kapha in the body. The Sanskrit word for bodhaka comes from bodhana, which is to be known, to be aware, right? Bodha actually is an awareness, to have that sense of awareness. So the bodhaka kapha is located in the mouth, and it is represented by your saliva. So if you think about the quality of saliva, from our digestive system, we know that saliva is a substance that is produced by the salivary glands. And what does its qualities manifest as, right? It is liquid, it is sticky, it is sweet, and it is slightly unctuous, right? And our digestive process really belongs or starts right in the mouth, right? So the quality of the bodhaka kapha is what keeps our mouth wet and soft. I don't know if any of you have experienced like dry mouth when you've been on medication, if you've been very sick, that icky feeling that comes about without having saliva in the mouth is not a very fun feeling, right? That sense of saliva in the mouth is also what gives us that softness of the tongue, and it enables the taste of the palate, right? And so there are many salivary glands that produce the saliva, but just think of saliva as being related to bodhaka kapha. And so if you didn't have saliva in your mouth, would you be able to speak, for example, right? Because it's really helping the tongue. The organ of speech is our mouth and our tongue, and so without this bodhaka kapha, you would not be able to speak very well. Now, remember, with all of the kaphas that we're mentioning, there's also functional intelligence, which is the agni within the kapha, right? And so the agni within the bodhaka kapha is also what's responsible for maintaining the temperature in the mouth. And this is why we stick a thermometer in the mouth to determine the temperature of the body, for example, right? And so that tells you there's a constant level, there's a homeostasis that's present in the mouth through the bacteria and the warmth and the sort of the saliva content, the chemical composition of the mouth, that is so important for the health of the body. Because when you come across people with bad breath, right, or what do they call it, halitosis, right, the health of the mouth really sort of indicates other diseases in the body. Your saliva, from an esoteric level, your saliva carries the complete chemical composition of everything that's going on in your body from a health or disease perspective in the content of your saliva. But that's topic for another discussion entirely. The other reason that bodhaka kapha is also referred to this way is, remember I said the word bodhaka comes from bodhana, to make known. It is through the bodhaka kapha that we're able to receive the awareness of food. So when you put something on your tongue and in your mouth, you become aware of the taste of food. And each of the taste buds of your tongue, and you'll get into this in further lectures and more advanced courses, you will get into the regions of the tongue that govern the taste, right? So just to start off with, the tip of the tongue is what governs the sweet taste, for example. And on either side of the tongue is what governs the sour taste. and then in the central part of your tongue governs the bitter taste, and so on, right? And so you can see how the sweet taste is really important for us, right? Because sweet is that taste of glucose, that fundamental energy-providing substance for our ATP functions in the body. If you look at the Krebs cycle as you go through your anatomy physiology modules, you can start to see, I mean, Western science or anatomy physiology sort of describes the Krebs cycle as sort of the breakdown of how the body gets energy, right, down to its very fundamental chemical components. But really, that's not even possible without all these other components of the body coming together, all the doshas coming together to create it, right? One of the things I like to do in the mornings is I like to take a decoction of triphala and sort of gargle my mouth, because triphala as a herb has a wonderful taste. The first taste is sort of, sort of sweet and sour and tart and all of that. So triphala, allows you to kind of maintain that lovely mucosity of your mouth, if you will. It kind of keeps a healthy salivary balance within your mouth, right? You can kind of just take a half teaspoon of triphala and put it in water and just use the liquid part. Once you stir it and you let it settle, you can just use, just the liquid part just to gargle your mouth. Other people also do some oil pulling. This has become a big fad and a trend about using a little bit of sesame oil and gargling in your mouth for up to 5 or 10 minutes. It's a great way to not only oleate the mouth, but it also helps restore the appropriate microbiome functions in the mouth as well, all the important bacterial functions and the oleation functions, and it also helps improve gum health and your teeth and your tongue, and keeps your mouth in good health. So when you start to look at whether a person's excreting, kind of expressing too much saliva or not enough saliva, or just having a dry mouth or sticky mouth, you can start to see the indication of disease, right? Just as we know from bad breath, or what is the quality of their tongue, you can start to really see how disease starts to manifest even in the mouth, right? Let's see, what else do I want to say here? Any questions so far? I know I'm like saying a lot of stuff here. Okay. So then moving on to Kledaka kapha. Kledaka kapha is what's present in the gastrointestinal tract. It is, again, in the upper half of the fundus of the stomach. It is liquid, it is soft, it is slightly oily and slimy. It is also the kapha that lines the protective lining as a gastric mucous membrane. Now, if you think about it, we know that the stomach produces hydrochloric acid. How does such a corrosive acid not eat through the linings of your stomach and eat through it? It is because of the functional intelligence of the Kledaka kapha. This kapha is so important, and through wrong food or wrong diet or wrong lifestyle practices, this kapha can actually be destroyed, right? So, for example, if you start to eat a bunch of really hot, peppery, spicy food, or with a bunch of habaneros or cayenne pepper, or just start to drink a lot of alcohol, which is very, very strong, right? Or if you start to eat a lot of pungent foods or just very peppery foods, right? All of these things start to dissolve that kapha membrane. Now, within 72 hours, those mucosal lining is being reproduced. But have you guys started to see on TV what is the largest amount of drugs that are being sort of advertised on TV, right? Just sort of take a wild gander. It has everything to do with digestion, or the purple pill, which is to deal with heartburn and reflux. And then you see the pictures of these people eating chili hot dogs, or drinking beer, or drinking sodas, and having whatever. That just seems all to destroy the Kledaka kapha lining in their stomach again. And yet they can take the pink stuff or the purple pill and kind of try to calm down the heartburn or reflux disease or whatever it is that they're experiencing, without understanding how the quality is being destroyed, right? So the word Kleda means liquefaction or hydration. That's what it means. It is what's responsible for maintaining the hydration of the cells and tissues. It is also what provides the energy to a person after they consume food. And because of its sweet taste, that's what actually initiates the blood sugar to rise. Now you can also see if the Kleta kapha starts to get damaged, the excess of the pachaka pitta starts to rise in the stomach, and you start to get the gastric reflux disease, that, the irritation. If they're drinking a lot of hard, rum or vodka or gin or whatever, the Kleta kapha starts to get burned, and so next day, they're starting to have heartburn, for example. So when Kleta kapha gets depleted or sort of taken away, you can see how the pitta in the stomach starts to takes over, right? And that's what creates a lot of that ulcer, gastric ulcer type of illnesses. So the way we can counteract that, obviously, is to do kapha pacifying, pitta pacifying things that would increase the kapha in the body. So what is a great substance to increase kapha in the body that you could consume? Anybody? Okay, what would be one of the things that you could do that is sweet, for example? What is the most commonly available food that we can all use to increase kapha in the body, particularly in the stomach? There you go, milk. That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So milk actually increases and restores Kleta kapha in the body. So Kleta kapha is also, even ghee, absolutely. Ghee is very oleating. It's very pacifying. It can calm down the pitta in the body as well, right? But you can't really drink large amounts of ghee. You can maybe take a tablespoon of ghee, right? It's pretty thick and sticky and oleating. Whereas milk has a tendency to coat pretty quickly because it's a little bit more fluid than ghee is, right? I hope you're seeing the difference. But yes, milk, ghee, any of the dairy, not the fermented or aged cheeses, definitely some cooked milk with a little bit of spices would be great, right? Now, the other thing to think about how Kleta kapha can get disrupted is also through emotional stuff, right? If you're somebody who's prone to anxiety and worry and nervousness, or just feeling very insecure or lonely, or if you're just experiencing a lot of grief and sadness, for example, these emotions can affect Kleta kapha, and Kleta kapha, in response to these emotions, starts to become even stickier and more thicker, and so it doesn't move as well. So what happens is the craving for more foods comes about, right? And so you start to want to eat more. So you can start to see how people start to get into emotional soothing and mental soothing by eating a lot more food, right? And so Kleta kapha disorders can also relate to obesity, excessive eating habits, the diabetes, right, high cholesterol, hypoglycemia, and even having peptic ulcers is really an insufficiency of Kleta kapha, if you think about it, right? Yes, even yogurt is okay, but we sort of, yogurt in the afternoon is okay, but we never recommend having yogurt in the evening. A sweeter yogurt, homemade yogurt, without all the other stuff going on would be okay. Again, it depends on the condition of the person or what dosha predominance or aggravation that a patient or that a client is exhibiting. So moving on into avalambaka kapha, it is a very important kapha that really supports all the other kaphas in the body. So functionally, it resides not only in the lungs, but it also resides in the spine, but primarily in the lungs, right? And so it is what's present in the respiratory and the cardiovascular system. It is in the trachea, it is in the bronchi, it is in the pleural space, it exists as a pleural fluid, it exists in the bronchioles and as bronchial secretions, the mucus that comes out of the lungs. And we see this when we have too much sinus issues going on. If you think about it, it is that quality, that fluid quality that protects the lungs and the alveoli. It is also what gives us a muscular tone for our lungs, right? So if you look at smokers, for example, people who've been smoking a long time, you start to see that caved in chest, right, where the chest starts to look a little bit hollow. It is where the avalambaka kapha has started to get depleted, and it starts to erode the support of the intercostal muscles and the ribs, right? So people who have COPD or emphysema, right, all of it starts, that avalambaka kapha starts to dry up and the chest starts to cave in, right? Or the chest starts to look like a little barrel because of the drying up of the avalambaka kapha. And so when the chest is contracted, think about what happens, right? The person can't even take in a deep breath, and they're unable to cope with any of the life challenges. They can't even expand their chest to allow air and prana to come into the body, right? So psychologically, if you will, it's affected by the sensations of love and compassion and support. So people who also have a lot of grief and sadness in their body, that affects the nature of the avalambaka kapha. Again, it becomes sticky and the lung function is affected. So if you start to look at people with depression, for example, one of the first things I started to notice is people don't take an inhalation. They're kind of holding on to their emotions because they don't want to feel it. They don't want to feel their grief, right? So that's one of the first things that you start to look at when you start to observe this. And so people with any kind of respiratory disorders, asthma, bronchitis, pneumonia, emphysema, these are all dysfunctions or pathologies of avalambaka kapha, okay? So then moving on to Shleshika kapha, which is the last kapha. Shleshika kapha is also thick. It is sticky, it is liquid and oily and slimy, and it is present all over the body, right? It is what's responsible for lubricating, especially the joint spaces when the two bones come together, right? It actually nourishes that it is the synovial fluid, if you will. It is what nourishes the surface of the two bones coming together, and also the cartilages that come together so that it can promote easy movement. So you can see how one of the most important functions of Shleshika kapha is really the ability to support the musculoskeletal system, and it also strengthens the ligaments. So what would happen, for example, if Shleshika kapha would go out of balance? What would you see in a person where the Shleshika kapha is out of balance? There you go, arthritis, that's right. Any kind of joint disorder, right? So what happens when Shleshika kapha starts to dry up, for example, right? Those kapha molecules that have that binding, sticky quality starts to dry up. And then what comes in between the joint spaces? What is entering the joint spaces at that point when kapha dries up? Air, that's exactly correct. The vata principle comes in. So what is the quality of vata? It is very rough. It is very dry. And so then the bone surface and the joint becomes dry and rough, right? And then the mineral deposits of the bone, like calcium, starts to crystallize and accumulate in the joint space, creating that cracking, that pain, that stiffness, and that inflammation, right? So we know arthritic, rheumatoid arthritis, all of these are sort of inflammation of the joints, and this is also an indication or disorder of the Shleshika kapha. So any kind of degenerative disease of the joints and of the bones are all disorders of Shleshika kapha. So now you can see how what would degrade Shleshika kapha. It is also extreme exercise. So people who run 10 miles, so you have these extreme runners. Running 3 miles a day is one thing. Running 5 to 10 miles a day could be an entirely different thing. Now, Ayurveda has different prescriptions for exercise, of course. We should only exercise up to our capacity. And the idea of health is very different than what the Western ideas of health are. So essentially, we should be very mindful of when we exercise that we're not degrading the Shleshika kapha in the joints. So weight training, so that's important in building the strength of the joints. To do weight training slowly to give resistance to the bone builds up the bone density and does help build muscles. But again, in moderation, right? Not to the point you can see, right? So if you look at the big bodybuilders, and whenever I have gone to a gym, and I used to be a personal trainer in many decades ago, and I used to train, men and women. And I'd always see men who'd want to come, and the first thing that they'd want are the big guns on their arms, right? The biceps. Well, what are they really doing by building up this overtly big structure of the kapha? They're building up these gigantic muscles in their body, and they're kind of building this armor around their body, right? And I'm not saying this is a case for everybody, but what are you armoring against, right? You're armoring against the experience and your taste of life. It becomes a coping mechanism through adding this excessive amount of kapha-like structure in your body, right? So what does that over kapha mean? Then you're disrupting the balance of pitta and vata in the body. So everything in moderation. Mild weight training is absolutely recommended to build strength, to keep movement in the synovial joints, and in the muscles, but not at the point of distorting the physiology. Okay, so I think we've covered all of this. Okay, so the general causes for kapha imbalance. Ahara, again, Ayurveda focuses on food, diet, and lifestyle, right? And all other lifestyle practices, including daily regimens. So excessive intake of sweet, sour, salty food items disrupt kapha. Excess of dairy products like milk and yogurt also disrupt kapha. Now you can start to see, well, why is this? Don't just accept my word for it. Start to look at the food that you're eating. Again, go back to the basics. What is the Panchamahabhuta quality of what I'm eating? How will this resonate with the bhutas in the body? Like increases like, right? So this is how you make the logical connection to what causes doshic imbalances in the body. Very cold and heavy food items makes sense, right? It's intuitive, right? Stale and frozen foods, right? Again, cold does not have prana, does not have movement, increases the sticky and cold quality in the body. Oily foodstuffs, again, very logical, right? You can associate the oily quality with kapha. The sticky quality increases kapha. Sleeping during the day, vihara from a lifestyle. So one of the best things that a kapha person can actually do is rise at dawn or before dawn. That alone will, and to get them moving, I don't mean just open your eyes and stay in bed, but just to actually get up and start moving, actually creates a movement of kapha that can start to reduce kapha. Subtle stuff, but can create a great impression in the physical. Just start to get up, sit up in bed, go about your morning ablutions, and then start moving your joints vigorously, right? Jump up and down on a little trampoline or a rebounder, or do some yoga. Start to move all that kapha stuff that's been accumulated in the head and chest out of the body, right? Being very lethargic, being a couch potato, laying on the couch just watching TV just increases kapha, right? Any kind of lack of exercise or movement causes lymphatic stagnation, increases kapha in the body. Again, the other thing I wanted to mention, right, as far as food goes, the sweet taste is very important and fundamental to the body. But having an excessive, I'm always shocked by how much sugar people actually add to their drinks or food or milk or all of these things, right? Milk by itself is sweet. It is unctuous. It has a nourishing quality. To add sort of a couple of teaspoons of sugar to it, not so intuitive to, you're kind of making it even more stickier, and you're not helping that process unless you're cooking the milk with other spices to reduce that sticky quality, right? So when you look at food and recommendations for your clients, start to look to see how you can balance these food and lifestyle practices for that person in context of what is out of balance for them. Again, overeating, right? When you eat more than is necessary. So eating slow is very important. Let's see. So again, as I mentioned earlier, like increases like, and opposites reduce, right? So, samanya and vishesha, right? So to reduce kapha imbalance, what would be what kind of doshic foods might you lean towards to reduce kapha in the body, for example? Anyone? What would be a kapha pathogen? Yes, non-dairy, that's one. Small amounts of dairy. What else? What could you add to pacify kapha very quickly? Spices, excellent. That's exactly right. So what do spices do? It actually breaks through that oily, sticky, cold quality and brings about warmth in the body, right? Um, Similarly, when you look at the quality of food that you eat, it is grains, right? When you look at barley or rice or wheat, for example, the quality of grains in general is very kapha predominant, right? But you can start to add grains like barley or buckwheat or millet, oats in small amounts, right? Muesli, couscous, all of these, and wheat in small amounts, not a lot, because wheat is actually very kapha promoting, right? As is also rice, as is also brown rice. So kapha people need to eat more drying, more vata increasing foods in their body, again, in context of their overall health, right? They need to develop a more active lifestyle. They need to, and kapha people are the ones that absolutely love the sticky, gooey, ice cream, rich, creamy stuff, right? Completely counteractive. If their kapha is out of balance, then that's what they want to be drawn to, right? Because the dosha is in a pathological state, they want to go to what they know best, that sticky, oily, cold stuff. So they are the ones who want to eat a tub of ice cream, when that's not what they need to be doing. Exactly, Marianne. They want to be removing the oily and fried foods, right? Oils in small amounts, not so much ghee, but maybe more of the olive oils, the corn, canola oils, etc. And nuts, the nut oils in small amounts, eating almonds in small amounts, etc. Right? All right. Ojas, ojas, as I said, is associated with kapha. The ojas is really the essence that is derived from all seven dhatus, starting from rasa to shukra, right? And dhatus that I told you are sort of that physical expression, the tissue system that is expressed in a very physical way. It is through that structural manifestation of kapha. So this is why ojas is considered as the essence of kapha, because it is that strength that allows your body to be nourished and to be protected and to maintain the body. And ojas is also very, very responsible for maintaining a healthy immune system. Now remember, the immune system is really a concept of these intricate, complex relationships of your lymphatic system, your thymus, your spleen, your pancreas, your stomach, your mouth. All of these things are all kind of working in this very highly coordinated, complex way. This is your immune system, the production of the B cells, the mast cells, you know, the bone marrow, the stem cells. All of these are important in maintaining your immune system. But it is that ojas that is responsible for all this protective function of the body. So therefore, ojas and kapha, you can see how kapha is very, very important in producing the protective function and the structural integrity of the body. So in conclusion, really what I want to really touch on is understand how the five elements really are the building blocks for all things in nature, your food, your doshas, all of it, right? To start to think about not just kapha dosha, but all your doshas as the organizational intelligence of these panchamahabhutas within the body and how they govern the different physiological functions in the body. This is really, really important, right? Just as much as fire organizes the Agni and Jala principle, start to understand all of it, you know, how kapha rules every geographical site that we covered in the body, how it rules the brain, how it rules the respiratory system, how it rules the stomach, how it rules the joints and the musculoskeletal system in the body. So by understanding all of these sub-organizational intelligence within the body, you start to get an overall understanding of what kapha is. Okay? That's all I have. one of the, I would, in Dr. Laud's book, in the Fundamental Principles, there's more detail. That content is what I used. I also used other texts that I have. Another one that I have several Ayurvedic texts, so, I could give you a very long list. But I'd start with the book one, the textbook of Ayurveda, Fundamental Principles of Dr. Laud's, and there's a great explanation of all of this in that book. And, start to think about this, start to just do observation. One of the biggest sort of takeaways I would tell you is start to observe, refine your powers of observation of others, right? Understand, develop and refine and enhance your own deeper understanding and how you come upon conclusions or judgments of how a person's physiology is or how a person's mental makeup is through the power of observation. I can't emphasize enough the importance of observing, not just learning to just look at a person going, oh, okay, they're fat or they're thin or they're kapha or they're pitta, but really just refining that ability, the power of darshana. As physicians or practitioners, we get to refine and take our power of observation to a subtler level, the very esoteric, the very, very subtle aspects of a human body and their mental makeup and physiology and how that person is expressing their life imbalances in that moment, right? So do this as you start to develop your case study forms. And in your case study forms, you will start to identify the type of subdosha based on, so pick your neighbors, pick your friends, pick your children, pick your family members, and just take your time, really start to observe and come back and analyze for yourself, make notes, and start to put in your own words. Don't just parrot what you've heard from others, but put in your own powers of observation, because you're all very intelligent people and you're all being drawn to the science of Ayurveda because this intelligence is waiting to be expressed. So please start to express and take notes of all your observation of the subdoshas and its subtypes, and start to just have some discussion on the forums about this. So thank you very much for listening to me. Thank you to Monica G for allowing me to teach on the fly. This was a very ad hoc